Hello, my name is Peter Breen. I'm with Publicis Commerce. We are here in Las Vegas at Shop Talk Spring, but we're actually taking a little bit of a break from the show itself to bring to you what we hope will be an informative discussion about a topic that is getting a lot of coverage over there at the show. It's not going to be a surprise to any of you to hear that that topic is AI in general and agentic commerce in particular. The people over at Shop Talk devoted an entire stage to discussions about AI. But that's a little bit misleading because it really doesn't matter what stage you're on or what discussion they're having. There's a mention of AI and also a lot of mention of agentic commerce. So there has been a lot of talk, a lot of research recently about agentic commerce, talking about mostly overall adoption numbers among consumers, not a lot of drill down into some of the particulars on how they are using the shopping agents. So to rectify that, we joined with the expert analysts at eMarketer to field proprietary research, where we spoke with 1,100 consumers who had already adopted the use of shopping agents for their experiences to get a drill down that really hadn't been there before. The name of the report that we produced is Trust Issues: How AI is Shaping Decisions at the Path to Purchase. Trust became an important word within the results for two reasons. One, the trust that consumers are now placing in these shopping agents and the recommendations that they're providing, but also the trust that they have in brands and retailers and how that is still having an impact on their purchase decisions as well. So to discuss the results from the survey and the report, we have representatives from each of the partners. From eMarketer, we have Sky Canaves, who is Principal Analyst for Retail and Ecommerce. And then from Mars United Commerce, we have Amy Andrews, their president. So thank you.
Thanks so much for having us, Peter.
And if you're ready, we'll just jump right in.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I did a little setup already, but the idea of the report is that AI and agentic search are guiding the shopper journey maybe earlier than a lot of people realize, and having a significant influence on brand decisions. So if I can ask you both, and maybe start with Amy, what in particular in the data from the report confirms that premise?
Yeah, well, I think like you said, this report is very interesting because it drills down much more deeply than some of the data that we've seen. And from a non-biased party like eMarketer. So of course we've heard all the stats and particularly at Shop Talk from the stage of what retailers are saying. But I think what's really interesting about this report is getting really specific and really deep on when shoppers are using AI at different points of their shopper journey, and then how they are using that. Are they using that to inform their decision, to switch brands? As you said, we can get a lot more information now on what's the reasoning behind that. And as cited by the title, trust is so important. So it's interesting to see how that plays out across different parts of the journey.
Sky?
Yeah, what we saw was that trust really determines a lot of how these AI-assisted shoppers act. Those who have more trust in AI and its recommendations behave significantly different than those who have lower trust, and that has the potential to reshape shopper journeys as these shoppers start to use the technology more and become more familiar with it and start to trust it more. One of the surprising findings for me was just how deep the shoppers are going into AI once they start using it for shopping. They estimated that they used AI in over 40% of their shopping activities once they started using AI. So those were two highlights that really stood out. And I see where AI really has the big inflection point, the biggest influence is in the middle of the purchasing journey. But as you mentioned, it's moving earlier, particularly among those shoppers who have higher trust. About 1 in 5 of these shoppers start their shopping journeys with AI platforms, while retailer and brand websites and apps are still by far the leading channel. We found that the AI platforms, chatbots, shopping assistants have already surpassed social media as a starting point. And that's just in a very short period of time and is only likely to accelerate.
Now, was that a surprise to you that that level of activity was already taking
Yes.
place?
Yes, that we see that it's already, number three after the retailer and brand websites and apps and after search engines. And those are the two heavyweights of the or big phases of shopping journeys.
Mhm.
And I think it's surprising because that then we know it's impacting discovery and not just research, right? So if it's coming in much earlier in the path, I think that's where typically I think our conversation is with brands and retailers have been more around that research and decision point versus the discovery. So to leap past social, I think is very, very interesting.
And that's why we see a big player like ChatGPT is now emphasizing that it wants to be more discovery platform with some of the new announcements that it made this week about how it's rethinking how it shapes the shopper journey, how it interacts with consumers.
Is it too early to suggest that there is a AI-assisted shopper persona, or do the results show that usage is like it spans all demographics?
No, I think there is definitely the AI assisted shopper, and that's really a new kind of shopper that brands and retailers have to think about in a way that they haven't before. We like to think of the next era of retail as encompassing three types of shoppers. There's the human consumer, and we've been around for a while, but we're becoming increasingly harder to please, more choiceful, more discerning. And then at the other extreme, there's this agentic autonomous robot that will do more of our shopping for us in the future. That's still highly speculative. The real inflection point for the foreseeable future is in this hybrid shopper, the human shopper that's increasingly using AI tools and technologies and platforms. And brands have to think about how they make their data and product content and brand positioning readable and machine ready for the AI bots that are intermediating the shopper journey, but also how they appear in front of human consumers who are the ultimate decision makers, even when they're using AI.
I think one of the things that we saw in the study too is that the younger human consumers are more likely to put their trust in AI. But I think to your question on, is there one AI shopper? I think really we need to take the same approach as we've done more broadly and looking at our audiences and then understanding how are they using any of our shopping tools, including AI. And that's where I feel like this study really brings to light those different use cases. So it's not just one AI shopper, but like how are different audiences that we're targeting using it for discovery or research or ultimately even purchase.
Okay. So another stat from the report is that nearly half of shoppers, I think it's 49%, would consider switching brands if the agent recommends an alternative. So Amy, I wanted to ask you, from the client perspective, how is that going to change the way brands are thinking about influence and loyalty?
Yeah, I think that was one of the stats that stood out the most to me because often we think about it for maybe researching and giving our consumers more information, certainly to help make the decision. But I think for switching, that's a huge opportunity that we need to be thinking about. And I know it will vary by category. That'll probably be our next report together. But it's something that I think confirms where many of our clients are headed and where we're partnering with them on making sure that we are developing content to win those agentic searches because they're so important, not just for new consumers who might need some new research, but for people who are already buying our brand. We need to make sure we're protecting those.
Yeah, what really stood out to me was that the top factor for a shopper to try a brand or purchase a brand that was recommended by AI was familiarity with that brand or already knowing about that brand, having heard about it outside of AI. And that when consumers are getting these AI product recommendations, they're most likely to want to do additional research. So go outside of AI. So that I think just underscores the importance of not only focusing on how you show up in AI, but where the brand presence is outside of AI and building, the basic fundamentals of like brand positioning, brand image, brand equity.
Yeah, it's not going to replace anything that we're already doing. It will only build on top of that.
Okay, and we're going to circle back and then try to drill down more into the brand building in a bit. Now, we mentioned trust up at the top. Half of the consumers believe that AI recommendations are accurate, but 2/3 do believe that there is bias involved too. So how does that, like, what do you interpret from that tension, and how should marketers respond to that tension?
Do you want me to go? Okay, I think it shows how complex we are as human beings and how we need to make sure as this space continues to evolve that we're looking at all data points. I think particularly now, and you said it at the start, I mean, everyone is talking about this space and how do we make sure that we are, as marketers, getting ahead of it with the data that we have, but also maybe not overreacting because as you shared, those are kind of competing points of this self-reported data. So how do we make sure we take studies like this, which is wonderful, and compare to other data sources that we have, and they continue to study that in this really quickly evolving space.
Yeah, I think we see that there's a paradox of trust when consumers and how consumers approach AI. All of them found AI shopping assistants at least somewhat helpful, or at least a little helpful in their shopping journeys. But at the same time, half of them are skeptical of the recommendations, more than half, 2/3 perceive bias, but they're also willing to act on recommendations and switch brands. So I think they're taking the recommendations with a grain of salt, not necessarily taking them at face value, but then going on to do additional research to validate those recommendations and make sure that they have a full assurance that they're getting what they're looking for.
So not just leaving it to the bots just yet.
Yeah.
So does AI ultimately make it harder or easier to build a brand?
That's a good question. I think that it is another tool that we have. So I think it's here. We should leverage it as best that we can. And I think that if we are being strategic in how we do that, yes, it can absolutely help us build brands.
And particularly when we think about how brands can incorporate AI into their own channels and into their own interactions with consumers. One of the other interesting findings I found was that most of the AI-assisted shoppers, they're using the general AI platforms or chatbots like ChatGPT or Gemini. They're also using integrated or embedded AI tools like the AI overviews and search. But a significant share are also using brand and retailer AI assistants. And I think the main reason why it's a smaller share is because they just aren't as broadly available yet. There's still relatively few retailers and even fewer brands that have their own AI assistants that live on their apps and websites and interact with consumers. And I think as we see more of those emerge, they'll be able to build more trust with shoppers.
And I think emerging as any of our marketing activity with a real benefit to consumers. There was a great example yesterday. One of my panelists from Bayer was talking about how in the paint shopping journey, people have a really hard time with color, which I think resonates with a lot of people. And they make their color choice, but it's really hard to pull the trigger when you're thinking about painting your whole house. And they created an agent just for that. So I feel like and it's solving a problem and helping people make that decision. So I feel like if we apply those same principles that we always have to this space and create something that has a real benefit, then we can build the trust and build some brands with that as well.
And that ultimately builds a brand because then the shopper will know, oh, this is the brand I need to go to for paint because they have that helpful feature that's going to get me exactly what I need.
Yeah.
And then it goes back to the discernment of the shopper on the agents. Well, no, I think Bayer is a better paint brand, so I'm not going to listen to your recommendation. And
Yeah.
So, now, there are a lot of different terms flying around right now. AI assisted commerce versus agentic commerce versus AI experiences. There was even a debate yesterday at Shop Talk about the adoption levels, and it ultimately became a discussion of the definition that they were using. So wanted to ask you, Sky, do these terms all represent the same shift, or are there nuances there that people should be cognizant of?
I think on the more extreme end of the spectrum, there is a definition of agentic commerce that is looking at it more as delegating a large part of the shopping journey and a lot of the shopping tasks, including ultimate purchase and decision-making tasks, to agents, which I think is not where humans necessarily want to go. AI-assisted shopping, as I mentioned, I think is a real inflection point, and it's expanding. I think as these AI-assisted shoppers use the technology more, become more familiar with it, trust it more because it starts delivering more personalized and relevant recommendations, they will gradually start delegating more tasks to what we think of as agents that are going out and capable of executing tasks on behalf of the shopper.
Good. Not to toot our own horns, but wanted to ask you where you think this report sits in the research that's out there.
Oh, the best one.
Well, yes, of course. But like in terms of the content that it provides,
Yes.
Where does it add to the conversation?
I do think it adds to the conversation by going a level deeper into the shopper journey. And Sky, as you pointed out, some of those real motivations around why shoppers are using agents at different points and what that means to them. I think your last question too on the definitions is a great push. Like when we talk about this space, I think we're often hearing big numbers with terms that we might not all agree with yet. So I love that this report provides a bit more granularity and brings it back to the human being. I think we're also hearing a lot of stats around the agentic space of what brands and what retailers are doing, or new companies entering the space. So I love that this is bringing it back to the consumer and really kind of dissecting what they're doing along that path.
Yeah, I think it provides a lot more nuance into how AI-assisted shoppers who use AI, perceive their interactions with AI, where they see it as most helpful, how they view its trust, and how it's shaping their shopping journeys. One of the other very surprising findings to me is that we often think of AI as driving efficiency and time savings, but only a third of the respondents said that they thought they bought products faster when they used AI shopping assistants. The rest either spent the same amount of time or even spent more time when they were using AI shopping assistants because they are asking follow-up questions within these conversations. The AI platforms tend to promote engagement at a deeper level, and then they're going out and doing more research on their own to validate these recommendations and their shopping decisions. So it actually can stretch out that middle of the funnel for now. I think as the shopping assistants and agents become more trained on individual data and preferences, they'll deliver more relevant and timely recommendations to that in a faster manner.